Greetings, adventure travelers and fellow keepers of the lake. How are you all doing? Welcome back. So today's video is about a viewer question I got, and by the way, you can always come to our Discord, join us and ask your own questions. But yeah, the question was along the lines of, okay, we had a campaign and every session we want to do some sort of a recap. And should we do a recap of everything that happened of importance in our session? Should we do it a different way? And like with every topic, there is a ton of things to say here, but I just want to ramble a bit into the camera and see what happens. I think regardless of if you play once a week or once a month or like once in 3 months, recaps are a wonderful way to transition from talking to players about everyday life, that funny thing that happened last night, all these things, into actually playing the game. And sometimes they can be just that, conversational. You just ask, hey, what do you remember from the last game? And then people tell you, and then you comment about it, and it can be very conversational. But usually it starts with the DM announcing that we're gonna do a recap. So you can ring a bell, for example, like this, or the one that you click, or if you have a soundboard like me, then you might assign just one sound that you always use to like announce that the session is starting. One part of the question that I was asked was, should we have everything that ever happened, everything of importance, in this like a log thing that is on the table that players can reference and make sure everyone is on the same page? I will show you later what I do for these types of situations when you have clues and things like that, but when we're talking just about session recaps, I usually do them one session at a time. So I always try not to have too much or too little detail, so I wouldn't go into, hey, you did this, then you did this, then you did this, and just try to recap the whole session. Recaps should never go over a certain amount of time. I would say that anything going over, let's say 10 minutes, is a bit much for me. Usually I would just include like story beats, things that were of some importance. For example, a dangerous moment. I would also include a fun moment just to remind them how fun it was. I would take something that was emotional or important for each character and mention that as well. And you should always include what the current direction that players were going into was. What was the mystery? What was their last question? Things like that. You can always write at the end of the session what is the thing that they are discussing just before the end. That is where you want to continue, and their brains will do their brain thing and just remember as soon as you give them hints about what they were talking about previously. If you have players that have zero idea what they did last time, what they found out, what their goal is, well, I think something has to change in that sense. Your players are not paying enough attention, or they're not taking notes, and the further apart your sessions are, the more notes you just have to take. I mean, if you're playing like once a month or once in 2 months, then someone really needs to take the responsibility of writing those notes. And honestly, I write notes as a GM, but I write so many things that are not for the players that it really helps if you have a dedicated note taker in the group, or the whole group is actually taking notes. As a GM, you will probably have this need to make recaps more fun, and there are ways to do it. I've heard people make poems that players could like hear as a narrator voice, and I do like narrator voices for recaps and cliffhangers. But you can roleplay, like lean into it. Go from just talking to people into a narrator talking about what happened, you know, or have a poem or a legend. You know those intros that go like, and so our brave adventurers continue on their path to ... Even like TV shows, previously on Lost. Lost is a pretty good show, and by the way, they have behind the scenes where they go over some like story decisions, and if you look at it, at one point you have this like core cast that are going on quests and doing things, and it reminds me of D&D campaigns so much. Maybe I'm just broken, but it really does remind me of that. Anyways, I'm getting lost. So the thing that was most fun as a recap for me was when we were playing our last campaign that was in a city, and players were doing things that really shook up the everyday lives of people. So after re-listening the RPGMainframe for 1,000th time, I found the episode going over how to run cities, how to make the city feel alive, and the thesis from that was to have this news flash. So I would write just bullet points of what happened and what were the consequences. I would give that to any AI, tell it just sound like your news. Then I would take that, put it into like a voice generation model, and I just put a robot that is opening its mouth and you would hear the news.
City in turmoil. Blackouts, mysterious figures, and pop star protests shake the streets.
And the players were very engaged. I think they listened to it with more focus than they had when listening to any other news, like from the real world. So there is another way to approach it. My first GM never gave us a recap. It was always our job to do a recap. Sometimes recaps made by the players can go in a direction of like joking around, which is fine for like a campaign that is not moody, but it doesn't always set the right tone. Also, not all parties are note takers, which our DM solved by just not giving us recaps. So you could see the progression of people just saying, okay, these things are important, so I'm just gonna start writing it down, which is not a bad thing. I mean, if players are taking notes, even if those are just very simple notes and they don't know what they are and they just read it out loud, you can always help them out. But the argument that my friend had is I don't give recaps to players because I'm not sure what they uncovered and what they didn't uncover, especially because we had games that were once in 2 weeks or once a month. So not to fall into that GM trap and say something that is not already known in the party, you let them do it. And of course, if they are role players and they start role playing and writing stories, that's even better. I was watching a stream on Renegade Rolls Discord. Every Saturday they would meet and they would have the nicest recap ever. It was so wonderful. It was also written like some form of like a story or a legend and narrated by one of the players. So wonderful. When I first started playing, I used to take these mind map notes in Milanote that were amazing for recaps, but they were very time consuming during play. So I would like listen a bit, then add a couple of notes. They were very high level, but they were so good for like reconstructing what we wanted to do, especially when quests and side quests started appearing. And they helped me a lot actually when I started DMing, so I would go through this and see like the structure of an adventure. You learn stuff from taking notes. Take notes, players. That's how you get them hooked. To answer the question of having like this big board that you have all the clues and all the important bits on, this is in my opinion not something that the GM should do. This is something that the players should do. In my group we had a corkboard thing with like pins, and I would have a lot of different handouts and clues just printed out. I would give them these handouts in the order they're finding them, and they would just pop a pin into it and put it on the corkboard. And this corkboard was always in our room, so they can reference it. To be honest, it looked freaking amazing, but it wasn't used as much because they already had some notes, and if they had a note and discussed it, I would give them a reminder, but it was a cool thing to have in the room. In investigative games, it really doesn't make much sense to play an investigative game if the GM is gonna be the only one who keeps all the clues in one place. So I would say talk to your players, see if they would like to keep track of more things. And one good way to encourage this is motivate your players to get a journal, like a specific journal for playing each type of game. And if you don't want to spend money on journals that are a bit more expensive than regular notebooks, buy a regular notebook, do some arts and crafts. You know how humans are. We like shiny things, we like arcane books and magical artifacts. So those journals, if they look nice, if the party made them, it will be a natural call to put something of importance inside them. There you go, Discord question answered. There will be a ton of links and resources and everything I could find on the theories of player and GM recaps in the description as always. If you haven't already, check out that button.